Hmm. Well, hello. I'm going to say hello, 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 and thank you for joining me. Ta-da. Okay. All right. I'm loving this series. We haven't begun yet, but I haven't, it's not 1:30 yet, but I'm loving this series because there are people, I've been asked to do several presentations, and this is going to be on my website, it's going to be on my YouTube cooking show um, link, and it will be available for me to continue to refer people back for, and I'm just thrilled about that. So, hello, I'm Nan Simonson, and I'm so glad you're here. I have launched a 6-day challenge, and in terms of a challenge, I'm not I don't have some big to-do reward. You'll have the PDF, combined PDF available at the end with these notes from which I'm taking my daily talk. And the base of this, in case you're coming in for the first time now and you need to pick up the first two and then finish up with the last four, or actually after today it would be the last three, is that there are 6 pillars of health uh, based on the College of Lifestyle Medicine. And those pillars are, some will say equally as important. I think they're all very important. Food is number one because it feeds you at a cellular level, but you can't digest if you're heavily stressed. You can't think well, and your body isn't going to function well if you don't sleep. If you don't move, your lymphatic system that doesn't have a pump like the blood does your heart is going nowhere, and that's part of your immunity. So every one of these pillars of health matter, and today's pillar is sleep, sleeping well. And the outline of what I'm saying will be posted after, a while after, and you'll be able to find it under comments. So there you have it. Anyway, so glad you're here. And I want to talk about sleep because I think it's one of the most maybe misunderstood, in that people feel that if they had a terrible night's sleep, in other words, they went to bed at 1 or 2 and they had to get up at 4 or 5, and they speak of it as an annoyance, as a reason for them to be uh, disappointed and a little bit groggy, and hopefully it won't happen the next day. But if they've got too much planned, and even, well, on holiday sometimes this is the worst, it ultimately doesn't matter. Do you know that it matters so much that they have shown one night for a college student, because this is measurable, one night of a lack of sleep, when people, and that's where you quite often see people pulling all-nighters. One night with a lack of sleep will lower the their cognition to the degree that their results on tests will be measurably lower, and they can track students through their career at school, and every test may be a little different, and every reason for being up late or only getting a few hours sleep may be not purely measured as the nights before, but still they could come to the conclusion that it matters very much in terms of what our brain is doing, and is therefore able to uh, put us in a good place based on, for example, passing exams if you're a student. But that even comes down to our ability to be coordinated, to play sports and not be hurt, to drive a car and be alert. And Linda, good to see you. I'm going to sneeze, oh no. That felt good. Usually there's another and another, but I'm just not going to think about it. No, that's not the case. Good to see you, Linda. Thank you for joining me, Linda. I say this every time. Linda has not missed one of my Facebook Live sessions, and that's just really gratifying, so thank you. Okay, so sleep is one of those things that, my whole point is that people slough off, that they see of, she said, bless you, thank you, that they see of as, again, more of a disappointment or annoyance rather than a physiological imperative. And yet, it is absolutely an imperative. There is a couple that I refer to all the time, and actually, let me show you their newest book. The Alzheimer's Solution is the first book, well, it's not the first, but it's one of their books, a power couple, Dean and Aisha Sherzai. They are neurologists at Loma Linda University. They actually have a neurological lab, and they both specialize in Alzheimer's. She is a trained chef. He is a concert musician. He's a singer. They're both quite remarkable people. And they wrote this book. Some people said, why did you put such a dessert on the cover of a book that's supposed to be about health? Well, I don't like this answer, but it's true. The publisher said, we'd like to see this picture on there. They had options because it will get more people to buy it. And they ultimately said, well, if more people will buy it and read it, we can live with that. And the book is, I believe it's absolutely gorgeous. So why am I going on about them? Because they're neurologists. And because if you're going to listen to anybody about how sleep affects the brain, so the book is the 30-day Alzheimer's Solution. They're very active, Dean and Aisha Sherzai, Sherzai. They're very active on social media, and you can hear, you don't have to read a book. You can do what I do a lot of. I'll hear the name of somebody, an average of 3 to 4. I truly believe some of us just require less. Okay, my mother couldn't sleep either, lived till 88, still sharp as a tack. When she passed, I'm sure it's hormonal. I won't take hormones. Okay, all right. And she said that she sleeps 3. I'm going to give her, I was going to say anonymity, but it's right there on comments. So hi, Leslie. That's interesting, Leslie, because the Sherzai say the least amount of sleep that we should allow ourselves to, I'll say reduce to, is 6 hours, and far better at 7 or 8. What happens is, and if you look back at my YouTube channel, and you can find that easily through my website, nansimonson.com, we have a circadian clock, and that circadian clock is stimulated by light, and this is part of what I am going to give you some bullet points on. And if you've heard that, and if you've heard me speak on this before, physiologically what happens is you have this little gland called a pineal gland. That light stimulates the pineal to then program our body to release melatonin 12 to 13 hours later. The melatonin usually gets into our system in the early evening, starts building up, and makes us want to go to sleep. If you go to sleep at 10, there's something called slow wave sleep. That's before you get to REM. That's where a lot of cleaning goes on in the brain. And so where do the Sherzais come into this? They're talking about Alzheimer's, they're talking about neurology, and what they're talking about is that if our brain is kept actively processing, which is what happens when we're awake, then it's not taking the time to clean itself out. It cleans itself to the degree that it actually, a brain after sleep in the morning weighs a little bit less than a brain before you go to sleep, because of its cleaning out plaques and amyloid, and it's sloughing off dead cells. This is when the brain has time to work, but you know what else it needs to do? It needs to process something else, and that is that it needs to process what had happened during that day. That's why you will hear, and you may have experienced, that you may try to learn something. You may try to play something on a musical instrument. You may be working on learning another language, and it's just not coming and just not coming, and at that class that day, and yet the next day, maybe the day after, but the next day it comes easily to you. That's part of what the brain does, that it must have sleep to do. So when you're, I'll say cavalier, if you're ever cavalier about sleep and think, okay, there's all these other things I'm going to pay attention to: movement, community, nutrition, um, uh, the rest of the pillars, uh, food, well, we said that, nutrition, but stress reliefs, etc. If you think, well, I'll do all of those, but that sleep component isn't that important, there are things that we can't see that happen that allow us to be sharper in the day, clearer of focus, learn better, and help prevent Alzheimer's, which usually takes 10 years to really start seeing results of. And I'm quoting things from the Share's. And what I was going to say earlier is what you might want to do with books like this, even though this book has some fabulous recipes in it, a lot of which were created by Aisha, who is, again, a trained chef. She went to culinary school as a physician because she felt that she and her husband, who are whole food plant-based, and that's another thing, they're raising their children whole food plant-based. I think their children now are preteens, like 10 and 11 or 12 or something like that. And they're raising their children on plant-based food because when they did a study about Alzheimer's, all of their research pointed to the value of plant-based nutrition and longevity and brain health, because of saturated fat being damaging for the brain and animal proteins being highly inflammatory and therefore, again, damaging to our arterial system, our heart, and of course our brain, because we have a very, very complex combination of veins and arterial flow up in our brain. Okay, so let me take you through there. So all of this to say that I'm not telling anybody what you should be doing and what you should be thinking. I'm simply I was going to say regurgitating, but I just did say it. You're going to catch me doing that all the time. I was going to say, and then saying it. It just sounds like such a harsh word. What I research, and actually a lot of my book is that. I don't tell you how to live. What I do in that book is that I share with you what the experts say about finding results and research end products that lead to the recommendations that I give, and quite often give you all kinds of resources that you can read. And one of the things you can do instead of always buying the book is start by just Googling their name with video after their name and watching some of what they talk about. I was listening to a professor of genomics out of the UK today, and I listened to almost 3 hours of his lectures because I was interested in reading his book, which just came out, called Blueprint, and his name is Robert Plomin. And now that I've heard him enough, I may or may not read the book, but I've gotten a lot of what he has to say about the importance of our DNA and how it relates to our behavior. It's really interesting. I've always thought it was epigenetics, and he's making a case for genetics, so we'll see. Okay, let's talk about this. We don't have a lot of time. Um, First thing I want to recommend is that you remain consistent with bedtime. Our body loves cycles, loves rhythms. The circadian rhythm is all about cycles and rhythms, and every living thing has a circadian rhythm, has a body clock. So the more often, and there's life, there's parties, there's get together, there's travel, but the more often that you can stay to a bedtime and a waking time, the better you are. And if you're not getting as much sleep as you believe you could or should, and the Shirzai say minimum 6 hours a night for brain health long term, with 7 to 8 being even better. Rather than getting up later, set your clock to go to bed earlier. Now, if you have a job, if you have demands on your time in the that make you not be able to set your for a 7 hour day, not set your clock at night for that 7 hour sleep, because that would put you to bed at 5. That's another thing. Some people get up and have to be on the road, not many, but by 2 or 3, or be up for something on a regular basis, shift workers, and that's different. But in general, set yourself up at night looking at the number of hours of sleep that you'd like to be experiencing on a daily basis, and set that time. My husband wants to get up at 5 so that he can do some things before he uses the sauna. He does some stretches, he works out, and then there's the walk, an hour of exercise or cycling. And so he goes to bed in time to get up at 5, and that's his bedtime, and he's rather adamant about it, even when we're traveling, unless there are just a few interruptions, because sometimes people are over and it doesn't work any other way. Avoid eating 1 to 2 hours before you go to bed, because your body is processing food primarily directly after you eat. All attention is on that. The digestion. And when you go to bed after eating, it's one of the worst things that you can do for not only your body, your gastrointestinal tract, but also for your brain, because your brain needs the blood and needs that energy to do what I had talked about earlier. And if it's all down in your gut and you're laying flat, and therefore you have even on a pillow, and you therefore have a straight line up your esophagus, that's where a lot of people start seeing problems with acid reflux, GERD, and ultimately Barrett's esophagus and esophageal cancer. So always those people are told to raise their bed, but it's better just not to eat an hour or 2 before bed. 3 is even better. That a lot of people recommend that, but some people find that to be hard. Your body clock, your circadian rhythm, I mentioned, and do understand that light first thing in the day needs to be natural light. Our body loves bright light during the day. It actually energizes us. It loves bright light first thing in the morning, because that's what sets the clock. It is interrupted at that circadian clock by bright light at night. So have your nights or your lights on dimmers at night if you're working on getting a really good night of sleep. Don't be under or near bright lights before you're going to bed, within an hour or 2 even before you go to bed. Have the lights on if the light is above, because of the way our lens turns turns, sort of flips images. Your Due to that, your eye sees the light that's above you before it even sees the light that's near or below you. So use desk lights at night. This was all recommended by the Share's Eyes, so that and actually by Dr. Andrew Huberman, who is a neuroscientist out of Stanford, and he talks a lot about sleep and what can make sleep much easier for you in a habitual way if you follow certain guidelines, and that was one of his as well. And that is keep the lights low, keep them low in spatially, and better yet, make sure that before you go to bed, everything is dim, including your electronics. All of my electronics turn yellow at night, but I still, and you've seen me talk about this before. Oh, it's in my kitchen because I was working on something last night and I guess I didn't bring it in here. I have the blue blocking goggles, even though these glasses are blue blocking. I have blue blocking glasses to put even over that. But one of the things Dr. Huberman talks about is that it's not just the blue light from electronics, it's the brightness of light as well that keeps the production of melatonin low. So consider that with light. It really matters. Let's see. For sleep, for best sleep, a cool room, 70 or less, a soft sound that blocks out interrupting sound. And for that, I even have a white noise machine. There's white noise machines as apps, and when we travel, I always have my white noise machine on wherever we stay, because little noises can wake you throughout the night. And in the morning, when you've gotten your REM sleep, or you're in the middle of REM sleep, if you've had an interrupted night, that's when those noises, because you're kind of slightly awake but not awake, that's when those noises can perk you right up, and there goes your sleep. Your cortisol starts to rise in the morning naturally, and you become much more easily awoken. Let's see. So quiet room, dark room, cool room makes all the difference. And then consider avoiding caffeine. Some of us, I'm one of them, are very sensitive to caffeine. I love a cup of coffee in the morning, but I've learned to do a half calf or even decaf, because there is a certain percentage of caffeine in decaf. Another thing I've been experiencing is matcha tea, a good organic Japanese matcha, and there's caffeine in that, but it's like 35 milligrams as opposed to what most cups of coffee have, which is like 150, 175, or a decaf, which is about 35 to 50. So consider the effect of coffee, because coffee has a half-life. It will keep you buzzed for hours and hours, and then there's what it does is it suppresses something called adenosine. And adenosine is it's not a hormone, but it's an element in our body that rises throughout the day. And when adenosine is high, we feel sleepy. Well, caffeine, any amount of it, and even small amounts for those of us that are sensitive, will park itself in the receptors of adenosine and block them. That's how coffee keeps us awake. And for some of us, it can ruin a night's sleep. You can fall asleep because you're just plain worn out, but you don't stay asleep. And when you wake up, you're buzzed, you're wired. A lot of that is from caffeine or any kind of a stimulant. Alcohol acts as a stimulant, chocolate acts as a stimulant, and of course, teas and coffee, especially later in the day because of that half-life, can be responsible for your finding sleep, long, sustained, uninterrupted sleep to be difficult. Also, not drinking water for an hour or two before you go to bed, because as we get older, it's easier to have those interrupted sleep stretches because you have to go to the bathroom. I think that's it, people. I'm at the end of the 20 minutes that I'm trying to keep to. Do any of you have a question? I go to sleep at 9, wake up at 1. Yeah, I hear you, Linda. She's talking about the waking up. Maybe I eat whole food, plant-based, turn down the AC, put on a mask. She's doing everything right. That must be crazy making. Um, Consider the caffeine, see about that. And yes, there are people, and they acknowledge that, there are people that can, it's rare. They both say it, and so does Dr. Huberman. Dr. Huberman is also a neuroscientist, but he's not an MD, whereas the Sherzais are MDs and neuroscientists. They have the degrees, they're graduate degrees or PhDs, and they're MDs. And they say the same thing, that most of us, almost all of us, need minimum of 6, 7 to 8 is better. Um, but they also agreed that there are some people who have adapted in such a way that they can get through life and do it well, like Leslie's mother, as she mentioned. Okay, I'm going to let you go. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about movement. Again, we can't survive without regular movement. We'll talk about ways to get that in a day. So my challenge to you today is to consider the things that I've said. Look at how much sleep you want, what time you need to get up in the morning, and then go backwards and try to get a bedtime that then has hours before that where you were prepping for bed. You may take a warm bath. You've cut out the food. The lights are dim, so your melatonin is turned, is allowed to continue to ascend until you go to sleep. Set your room up for sleep and not other activities, and nothing stimulating. If you do anything that's stimulating in the later afternoon or evening, consider cutting that back, especially if you're having a hard time sleeping. The bright lights, avoid the caffeine, and see how it works. I'd like to hear from you how it does. You're going to have these notes here as a comment. That's where you'll find these on a daily basis, and they're usually posted within a couple of hours. And I want to thank you for joining me. A lot of my text for this training is coming directly out of my book, so if you haven't read Aging Powerfully, please consider doing it. And do me a favor, if you have read it, leave a review on Amazon. The more reviews a book has, the more likely they are to make it visible when somebody is looking for something in a certain category. And we've got a mission. We have a mission to make sure that people understand that we don't have to follow where the health of most Americans is going. And it's not going in the right direction because we're too influenced by the things that are bad for us, including processed foods. And that's why I encourage, and I hope you worked on this in these last few days. That's why I encourage that you consider getting as much as you can of whole foods that are plant-based. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day, because you know I'm going to. And I hope to see you tomorrow here. Tomorrow is Sunday. Gosh, what is tomorrow? What is the date, the date, the date? Oh, today's the 18th, tomorrow's the 19th, and we will be doing this every day until Tuesday. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.